You're watching Open Agenda. Here's our host, Joe White.
Welcome to Open Agenda. I'm your host, Joe White. In the studio with us is Mr. Robert Taylor from Salisbury. Thank you. Mr. Mike Goldberg from Delmar.
Good afternoon.
I know everybody has some fatigue covering 287G. We got the impression, and I want to use that word very purposely, the impression that this has been put on the back burner for the next 6 months. But from a legal aspect, especially with some of the maneuvers that Baltimore County has done, Bob, you've brought it to our attention that there are actually other options. Some we may be doing now, like just an informal agreement with ICE for communication, or even the potential to go back and use the Department of Corrections directly with ICE. Is that accurate?
Yeah, that's true. And the good news is that the feds have just released another list of sanctuary jurisdictions, and we're not on it.
Okay. Well, we got the feds, we got Anthony Brown, we got our own Wicomico County Legal Department. It's a lot, but I'd like to take a quick break. And when we come back, I'd like to go through the legal side of it, and then I'd like to offer some analysis of what we might expect to see next. So stay with us. When we come back, we're actually going to go through with Robert Taylor the legal analysis of the current state of an agreement, informal or formal, with ICE. So stay with us. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Open Agenda. Still in the studio with us is Mr. Bob Taylor from Salisbury. Mr. Mike Goldberg, thanks for joining us.
Yes, sir.
So I want to talk about the legal ramifications of the county executive pulling the 287G MOA last week.
As it stands right now, with the sheriff and his deputies being removed out of this equation at this point in time per this guidance, what we are looking at and what we are concerned about even more is that I've kind of caught wind that the General Assembly might end up taking out the fact that correctional officers may do this and changing state law. So what I would like to do in this is potentially table this until we get through session. And if we get through session and there have been no changes and correctional officers have the ability to do it, I would revisit that with the director of corrections at that point in time.
I want you to give us just a little bit of background, a short background of what this whole program is and why are we here?
I think we ought to do a little through the looking glass.
Sure.
Let's begin at the beginning.
Okay.
As the king said, the 287G program, that is agreements between local governments or state governments and ICE, that started under the Clinton administration in, I think it was 1998.
Okay.
So it's
almost 30 years.
It's been around for almost 30 years. Now, it didn't really take off until more recently. I saw an article the other day that said as of 2010, there were about 60 of these agreements.
Okay.
There are 3,000 counties in the U.S.
Okay.
And there are a lot of course, states and other local cities can make these agreements too. So I think somebody figured there's about 5,000 potential localities that could make agreements. So only 60. It really took off under the first Trump administration.
Okay.
That's when it began to grow, particularly the last couple years. And that's when the first Maryland counties began to make agreements in that period of time. Anne Arundel County was the first. It actually only lasted there for a year.
And that was done directly just by their county executive, right?
That done by the county executive. The county runs the incarceration jail in Anne Arundel County. The sheriff doesn't have anything to do with it. What happened there was a Republican county executive made the agreement. Later that year, he was not reelected. A Democrat was. The Democrat ran on a campaign of canceling the agreement and did so.
So this is a political football, really?
And then there are 3 other counties that still have them. That was Frederick, Harford, and Cecil.
Okay.
So they've had their agreements since that time. They made their agreements in 2020.
Now we saw the law department's presentation. Andrew Illuminati really spoke to this memorandum of guidance from Anthony Brown, okay?
The Attorney General.
The Attorney General, Anthony Brown. Why is that not as much of a factor in what you saw last week?
I would kind of discount what Illuminati said and let's look at the law.
Okay.
Let's do that. I mean, it's like law school. One of my teachers always said, what does the statute say?
What does the statute say?
That's really what we have, because we don't actually have a statute specifically. We've got a bunch of them.
Okay.
It's a mess. We have federal statutes, we have state statutes, and then we've got Anthony Brown coming in. And in the last year, he's put out 2 guidance memoranda totaling over 20 pages that, frankly, I have a hard time understanding most of the 20 pages.
With a law degree.
Yeah.
Okay.
And, well, part of it is because he says stuff and doesn't cite anything for it, so you can't tell where he's coming from. But I've tried to look at that a little bit, and I've also looked at the federal law. And some of the things that the federal law say that are very important, it specifically prohibits localities, states and localities, from doing anything to interfere with the exchange of information with ICE involving the citizenship status or immigration status of people. So they can't do that. It's a prohibition. It also says that in addition to these standard 287G agreements, there are 3 model forms that ICE has, that you don't have to have an agreement with ICE to share, to participate, and cooperate, I think is the word in the statute, with ICE regarding immigration law.
So you're saying we don't have to have an MOA to...
You don't have to have an MOA. You don't even have to have a written agreement. Baltimore County has just made, I'm going to call them special agreements.
Okay.
In other words, it's not one of the 3 standard forms.
Okay.
It's something that they've negotiated with ICE separately. And what they're doing, Baltimore County also runs their jails. The sheriff doesn't do it. And they have an agreement whereby they exchange information with ICE on people who are incarcerated.
Okay.
And ICE tells them whether they're interested in them or not.
Okay.
And if they are, the deal that they've made, and this is what they've been doing since 2024. In other words, they had already been doing this, and 2 weeks ago they announced their agreement with ICE that essentially makes it into a written agreement. Okay. But informally, they had been doing it already.
And they didn't vote on this as a county council. This was done directly by their county executive there.
By the executive branch. The agreement was actually signed by the people who run the incarceration, the jail.
Okay.
It was approved by the county attorney. He signed off on it for legal sufficiency. And what that says is that if there's a ICE warrant, if there's a warrant that's been signed by a judge and ICE indicates they're interested in that person, then they are supposed to give 48 hours notice before he or she is released.
Okay.
Not afterwards. I want to make this clear because we've been talking 48 hours for afterwards for it, holding them over.
Does that mean that they have to have been convicted of a crime or just arrested for
It
suspicion?
means they have to have a warrant from a judge under the federal immigration laws.
Okay.
Now, that's 48 hours notice.
Okay.
So that would be ample time for ICE to send somebody to the incarceration facility, the jail, and when they're released, to just take them into custody.
Yeah.
So there's no county holding them over.
And one advantage, like Baltimore County would have, is they're relatively close to the Baltimore ICE office.
Not as close as we are.
But Salisbury is even closer.
Yeah,
Our
right.
ICE office is
Yeah,
around the corner
right.
from the
I mean,
detention facility.
The ICE office in Baltimore's downtown. I mean,
Yeah.
it's probably 10 miles from Towson.
Yeah.
But it'll be more adequately staffed than we are locally. Not to say that we're inadequately staffed locally.
But-
Yeah,
but-
I
but-
have a
but-
feeling there are a few more people in the Baltimore County jail
that's-
than there are here.
Yeah.
But anyway, getting back to it, if the person only has an ICE detainer, now that's different. ICE can issue detainers if they have probable cause to suspect someone of a violation that would be subject them to being deported.
Is that covered in this Baltimore County
That's
agreement?
also covered. Now they have to give 4 hours notice for that
Okay.
because they're not at the same level of seriousness.
Okay.
But again, that gives them plenty of time to get from downtown Baltimore to Towson. So this agreement, I think, is probably what we should move to. I'm not sure, from what I've been hearing at the county council meetings, that we're not already doing something like this. Because if you'll remember, about a month ago, when they had a meeting and they interviewed somebody from ICE, was on the
Peter Mercurio.
Nothing actually changes for what you are currently doing. The detention center already honors our detainers. Therefore, nothing changes.
But somebody asked him, well, what difference will this make if we do or don't do it? And he said, well, it won't make much difference.
Yes.
And the last council meeting, Ms. Julie Giordano said, well, we've released some people, and ICE just hasn't been able to get there to pick them up, which indicates to me that they're giving ICE notice, just like Baltimore County was doing.
Well, okay, so I want to dive into that a little bit. Do you believe that that's the case, that we have actually released people that should have been detained?
I don't know. Maybe not. But what my point is in bringing that up is that we must be telling them, or she wouldn't have said it.
If we did make this MOA with ICE, the one paragraph in there that was added back in June to our potential agreement was about us being responsible as county taxpayers to transport the detainees to Baltimore if necessary.
Yeah, this doesn't have that. The Baltimore County agreement doesn't have that.
But if we had signed that one, and as the county executive stated, if folks were released because ICE couldn't come get them, wouldn't we have been responsible for transporting them had we assigned the MOA?
Well, I think it's if ICE wanted us to do it. Yeah, I mean, I don't think it was automatic. I think it was an option.
But if we had to, would it have made it budget neutral? I mean, wouldn't there have been a cost?
There have been a cost, yeah.
Well, so at the very least, she misspoke on that because she was very adamant that this was a budget neutral proposition.
Well, speaking about misspeaking, I mean, it's a little bit like the song, the old song, you know, first you say will, then you won't. First you say will do, then you don't. I mean, here's her announcement from back in September. Wicomico County, this is her headline, or her office's headline, Wicomico County announces intent to move forward with ICE warrant service officer model. That's the model where somebody would come in and serve the warrants in the jail, other than the people at the jail. And it was intended at that time that the sheriff would do it. And here she is saying, County Executive Julie Giordano expressed their support for this initiative, citing the importance to law enforcement and community protection. Public safety is our top responsibility, said County Executive Julie Giordano. They will work closely with ICE to implement training and procedures. And then a few days later, like me, Congressman Harris figured that, hey, it's a done deal. Congressman Harris praises Wicomico County's new partnership with ICE.
So if she believes so wholeheartedly back at that point that for public safety we should have this agreement, and she has the ability, like Baltimore County and even Anne Arundel County, to make her own agreement, why hasn't she done it?
Well, I mean, I think to me, if I were the county council, I would say, look, we have to have a work session and get everything on the table. What exactly have we been doing? What are we doing? And if we are doing something, why shouldn't we just continue doing it, or should we stop it? In other words, let's have a discussion about that. And I'm not trying to push it one way or another. I'm pretty much neutral on this.
You've said that several times in public comments, that you're not making an opinion about which way we should go. You're trying to show the legal possibilities that we could go.
I think everybody needs to know. There are a lot of people who we know at these hearings we've been having, or the county council meetings, who are opposed to doing anything with ICE.
Exactly.
And then there are people on the other side, and I think it's probably the silent majority, to use that old term, that probably feel like to some extent we should be working with ICE. To some extent.
But we may already be working with ICE. If you listen to Peter Mercurio from the ICE office, nothing's going to change with the MOA.
But whatever we're doing, let's let everybody know what we're doing.
Yeah.
Now, she's given the, almost call it an excuse, that, well, we really don't want to do anything now. She's withdrawn the request for the county council to take a position on the basis that next spring in the General Assembly session, they may pass some ordinance prohibiting any agreements with ICE. Now, I've already explained that under the federal law, you can't stop the communications. I mean, there's a federal law that says that we can have communications with ICE, and a state or local government can't contradict that. So that would be a violation of the federal law. It would be preempted, in effect. Mm-hmm. So to me, we need to get all this out there and find out what the heck's going on.
Bob, it's my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, that under Maryland law, that law enforcement officers cannot even ask a question about immigration status during a traffic stop, an arrest, or even booking. So the only way that the local law enforcement is going to know that perhaps they're dealing with an illegal immigrant would be if, when they are checking, for warrants through the system where they call it in on the radio, then they should be advised at that time, yes, there is a federal immigration warrant, or if they do it once they're back at the jail. But again, it's my understanding that the state law prohibits asking a detainee that question.
Yeah, I've only been looking at this from the standpoint of people who are incarcerated, so I can't really answer that question directly. Totally, I don't want to speculate on it. But in terms of people who are incarcerated, they can, and that can't be cut off. So, I don't know whether the federal prohibition would extend to the circumstances you've mentioned or not. I just don't know. So that's all we're dealing with. Now, Mike Lewis has said, and I give Mike Lewis a lot of credit, he's been the transparent person here. This came up in July. The rumor was out there that the sheriff's office on the street, not in the jail now, but on the street, that they're working with ICE. And he said, no, we're not. We're not doing that.
There's a lot of folks who don't think the sheriff has been overly transparent on this.
Well,
He's been quiet at
nobody,
long stretches.
Yeah, but nobody has contradicted that with any hard evidence. In other words, nobody has said, oh, I know that somebody was stopped down on Jones Mill Road and the sheriff did this and that and the other. So there's been no contradiction of that.
Yeah, but sometimes a lack of communication is the lack of transparency. I mean, the last interviews that were done with the sheriff prior to the November work session was in July, really. So there was very little discussion publicly directly by the sheriff.
Well, to get back to the transparency, remember in that July interview, he was the one that let it be known that they were negotiating with ICE at that point.
Sure.
He made the comment, it was in the news article. So that came out about because of what he said, not anything that the county executive said.
In that news article, didn't he state that illegal immigrants were not the criminal element that were affecting Wicomico County?
Oh, I think he's made comments to that effect, but I'm trying to focus on the law here and what has actually happened.
But couldn't you see that's why it upset so many folks, lay people out in the public, when there's some information, there's contradictory information, and then there's long stretches of silence, especially by the county executive?
Well, I think, yes, I think the silence is deafening, and that's why I think we need to have the work session.
Okay. And the contradictory information.
Yeah.
I mean, let's face it, this started out as being the jail enforcement model, then it was going to be the warrant service officer model, and then it was going to be the MOA was going to be between ICE and the sheriff's office. Then it was going to be more of a tri-party agreement between the sheriff, ICE, and the detention center. And then the sheriff most recently was taken out of it, and it went back only. I mean, they've just been all over the place. Well, who the heck knows what direction they're going?
I'd like to take a break. And when we come back, I'd like to discuss more of that presentation that we saw the law department give and what holes you may have seen in it or what other questions you would have coming out of it in a future work session. Can we stay with us when we come back? We're going to talk about what has transpired and where Bob Taylor thinks that this is probably going to go. Welcome back to Open Agenda. Thanks for sticking around, Mr. Bob Taylor. Mike Goldberg, thank you.
Still here.
So, okay, I'm not a lawyer. I've been attending the county council meetings. I've seen the protest. I've seen the public comments. I did see our county law department give a presentation that pointed some of the changes that were made to Anthony Brown and his memorandum of guidance. But I also feel like there's just, it's so vague that someone like myself is having trouble keeping up. So I want you to explain to us really what we didn't see and what we should be requesting at a future work session.
Well, I mean, I think what we need to do is have an open discussion of this at a work session. But let me make a point about Anthony Brown and his guidance. And I think it is more to intimidate local governments and sheriffs into doing anything. Now, the point that he seems to make in both of his announcements, he's done 2 this year, incidentally, is that if you detain somebody, meaning this is county people now we're talking about, or sheriffs, if you detain somebody after they've been released from their incarceration, from whatever local law they violated or state law, then you could be sued under the civil rights laws.
Okay.
So essentially trying to throw a blanket on having them to do anything that way.
Okay.
Now, the beauty to me of what Baltimore County has done, it gets around that.
Sure.
Because there's no county detention involved in it at all. The other thing it gets around is the people who do it in the detention center or the jail are not law enforcement officers under the state law that defines or tries to prohibit what state law enforcement officers can do, because it expressly exempts correction officer people.
Yeah.
So Baltimore County, I think, has threaded the needle
Okay.
the way you'd want to thread it. And it's something they've been doing, so it's not anything new. They've just memorialized it in an agreement that came out 2 weeks ago after both of Anthony Brown's guidances.
So the last one, for the last memorandum of guidance came out in middle of October.
Mid-October, yeah.
Which was after the work session was scheduled for the county council and the executive and the sheriff to talk about what they were going to proceed with and possibly take a vote on 287G. Why would we not expect more lack of transparency on the next step? I mean, you're expecting a work session. How likely are we just to find out later on that there's an MOA signed directly with the county executive?
Well, we could. I mean, we could find that out. I can't say, just speculating. I don't know whether there is or not. Obviously, she can sign one, just like the gal up in Baltimore County. It's a woman county exec there, Kathy Klausmeyer, did. So, in fact, some people on the county council up there, I think, opposed it. They didn't want to have any agreements with ICE.
But they didn't get a vote there.
Yeah, they didn't do it with a vote.
And what do you make of her statement that she's going to wait till the spring to see what the General Assembly has to say? I mean, would that negate Baltimore County's
Here's the way I look at it. If in early September you're saying this is really important, we should be doing this, and you can do it, and possibly we have been doing it, and may still be doing it, we don't know, on this, I'm going to call informal basis, meaning without a written agreement with ICE, well, then we should at least know that. And if you're going to stop it, because it might be prohibited in the spring, which I think is highly speculative and frankly unlikely because of the supremacy clause. So why would you stop it if you think it's important?
So Michael, you've been going to the county council meetings. We've been covering this. You've attended the work sessions. Do you have any faith that you'll have any knowledge of what's going on until after it's really already happened?
We don't seem to have knowledge about much that's going on in this county until it becomes a crisis anyway. No, I don't believe that they want to address this any further. I don't think the county council has the stomach for it. This is a hot potato. And now I think the county executive, she's raised the ire of the left by her efforts to push this through. And now that it didn't happen, and she just pulled the plug on it, now she's angered the right.
Well, and what about just fiscal conservatives like myself in the middle somewhere who always questioned whether or not this was going to be a budget neutral proposition? I even spoke at the last county council meeting. And I was really ready to hear about how this was going to be budget neutral at the work session. Of course, they never had that part of the work session. If there's not a political victory in here, is she willing to follow through with it at all?
It's hard to say what she will do. I think if she were smart, she'd probably just walk away from this, at least for now. Look, we don't know what the General Assembly is going to do, in the next session. But we, amongst ourselves, we've been speculating for months that they would pass more stringent legislation that would bar local jurisdictions from cooperating with ICE. So So this should not have been new news to the county executive had she been paying attention and had the law department been paying attention. I think that they were just so blinded by their desire to push this forward, because, as you once described it, it was red meat for the MAGA base. But when she saw just how much opposition there was to this, I think it gave her pause.
Were you surprised that the law department brought up this memorandum of guidance 2 weeks after the second one was issued by Anthony Brown, and that was cited as the reason after we spent another 2 hours listening to public comments? I mean, couldn't this have been stopped before it ever started?
I don't know. That's a hard question to answer, but I'll say this, basically getting back to what Mike just mentioned about next spring. I think under the federal prohibition, the law I mentioned earlier, against state law interfering with communications between local governments and people with ICE involving citizenship or immigration status, I think they can continue to do it no matter what the state law says.
Well, the state law does say, and I quote, "A law enforcement agent may not, during the performance of regular police functions, inquire about an individual's citizenship, immigration status, or place of birth during a stop, a search, or an arrest." So,
But then corrections officers are not law
they
enforcement
are
officers.
not law enforcement
And that was his point
officers.
earlier. Yeah.
So, to me, they actually could have moved forward, in my opinion, with the warrant service officer program, provided that the involved entity was the detention center. But it would have been very straightforward. I think they could have gotten away with that. So why did she pull the plug? Now, the county executive claimed in an interview on some other program that it had nothing to do with public opinion. And, I think that's, I'm calling horse feathers on that. I think that is the reason that she pulled the plug on this. She started to understand that this was wildly unpopular in the county, and she saw that it would put herself in some kind of political jeopardy, and decided to, make some excuses for why she was pulling it.
I'm still of the belief that had they put it to the council vote last Tuesday, that it would not have passed.
And I agree.
And that might be, but I'll go out on a limb, and I would strongly suspect, if I were a betting man, that we're probably not negotiating, we're probably communicating with ICE, just like Baltimore County is now and has been, and that she's pulled the plug on the county council vote, yes. But I doubt that has changed, and that's why I think everybody deserves to know exactly what is going on right now.
Well, let's hope that transparency wins out. Yeah. But if you're a betting man, I'd hold on to your money. Thank you both. Thanks for your insight.
Sure thing.
Thanks for watching this episode of Open Agenda. We'll be back next week with another new episode.
I know what I'm doing, man.